Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
The artist community is much like the scientific community, where people tend to be underrepresented. And I think that artists need support to create. So I love seeing unusual art, and I want to give people a place to really showcase it and show off their talent and who they are without getting lost.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. Today I'm speaking with Anna Pilette, a geophysicist and a technologist out of Portland, Oregon. For over 2 decades, Anna's work has been focused on imaging things under the waterline. She has worked on a wide number of projects using robotics and drone technology, including acoustic systems, autonomous vehicles, remotely operated vehicles, and unmanned vehicles of every type. Her work has taken her around the world on every type of marine and subsea project that exists. She also brings her scientific experience together with her artistic interest through her art company, Atomic Dumpling Media. Anna, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, no problems.
So, how did you first become involved in working with this robotics and drone technology?
I joined the military in 1994. I originally intended to join the Navy to be a diver. My interest was diving, and at the time, women could only do limited roles in the military, even though it was 94. So I went in originally intending to be a diver. I had read a book about Navy salvage divers, underwater demolitions divers, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went in, and when I took it's called the ASVAB, or at least it was, I scored really high on it. And one of the things that I got offered was a little tiny thing called Ocean Systems Technician Analyst, or maintainer. So I chose analyst because it sounded neater. And one of the descriptors was you worked with marine biologists. So I thought that sounded neat. And of course, it was completely baloney. But it ended up being a neat job, and it introduced me into the world of acoustics and acoustic sensors. And just from there, after I got out of the military, I stayed working with sonar systems and just progressed on from there.
So you mentioned that when you got that job in the military, it wasn't what you were expecting. What kind of work was it?
It was anti-submarine warfare. So my job was to detect, localize, and track submarines.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I can see where all of the acoustics that you worked with and all that technology comes in with that type of job. So, since then, what kinds of robotics and drones have you worked with?
I work mostly with autonomous underwater vehicles. I work with remotely operated vehicles. Those require a pilot that's independent. I don't do that part. For the autonomous vehicles, I do that part because you program those. But the remotely operated ones require a pilot and a small crew. Typically, I'm the project manager, or I'm involved with the oceanographic sensors portion of it. But professionally, those would be it. I have designed a remotely operated surface vehicle. I would love to be involved with autonomous surface vehicles, which are for the ocean, and UAVs, which are unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise sometimes known as UAS, which is systems instead of vehicles. I'm writing a business plan for my side gig, which is going to be for UAS filming. So I will be using the drone for filming all kinds of neat stuff when I get the business plan finished and I get the FAA license all set up.
Oh, so for the aerial systems and drones, are you just starting to work with those now, or have you worked with those before?
I'm a hobbyist. I tend to break them a lot. I'm really good at crashing. I tend to try to fly them through trees and branches and stuff, and I have a really good time with it, but sometimes it'll be one little branch that I don't see, and I end up crashing. So with filming them and stuff, you need to sell film and to sell aerial photography, you need to have an FAA Part 107 license. So that's what I'm actually going to do. And I have a side business, an art company, that I'll be doing this through.
That's right. And what's the name of your art company?
Oh, shout out for Atomic Dumpling Media. We run comics right now. We're running a comic called The Budget Strips. We have an art shop where artists can join up. We're limiting it to a number of artists so that people don't get lost and they can tell their own story with their own talent, because I feel like the artistic community needs as much help as they can get to really show off their talents and to show unique, one-of-a-kind pieces that people don't see every day. And so we have a print shop right now. The actual shop is called the Stockpile. Everything is related to atomics and radioactivity, and it's just kind of fun. I do photography, so it's in there. My business partner is a visual effects artist in Hollywood and is an award-winning visual effect artist. So we will be doing animations and films and things of that nature. We're currently writing scripts for all of it.
That's really cool.
So we're trying to build an artist community with it. So that's why we included a shop, because we felt like people got lost on some of the online vendors that kind of overcharge a lot. And we noticed that when I was going to sell my artwork. So we switched it and made it so that people could post their resumes and portfolios and kind of showcase their talents with their own filmmaking, cartoons, illustrations, and heck, even their music if they want. We have a friend that's in a band who's slowly gathering up her artwork from the years. She has everything on her SoundCloud, so we can link to her SoundCloud or her Twitter account. And it's really just to help people out, because the artist community is much like the scientific community, where people tend to be underrepresented. And I think that artists need support to create. So I love seeing unusual art. And I want to give people a place to really showcase it and show off their talent and who they are without getting lost.
You know, it's interesting. The people that I know who have scientific backgrounds also tend to have an interest and a talent for art. I tend to see those two things coming together a lot. Do you notice that as well with the people that you know?
You know what? Yeah, some of the most amazing engineers I have ever met are special effects artists. And people that do art. There are sculptors that are just amazing engineers, and they would never consider themselves an engineer. And yet here they are, they're building these instruments or contraptions to capture wind, or sculpture that moves and reflects light in certain ways. And they're using mathematics. They're using every principle that an engineer uses. And yet I don't consider myself an artist. I am a scientist that happens to understand how light works. And I consider myself a photographer, but not an artist, because I don't feel as though I am good enough to call myself an artist. I know it sounds weird, but it's something that I aspire to be. Whereas my business partner, she is an amazing artist, and she does everything in models and miniature, and she paints things sometimes with a paintbrush that has like a solitary thing on it. I don't know how she does it, but she makes intricate patterns on teacups that are like half an inch tall.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing. She has so much talent. Yeah, so I just don't get it. But yeah, I would never call myself an artist when I think about people like her. You know, I take pictures through a camera. But, you know, there are photographers out there that are just, I only could hope to be as good as them. And, you know, I invite them to come join us. I love the idea of community and sharing, and people tend to get lost behind the picture. You don't remember their names. I think people should remember their names.
Yeah, there's such a close relationship between art and science. They're really linked together. It's different ways of showing appreciation for the world, two different ways of expressing it.
It is two different ways of expressing it. I think that in science, there's so much to explore, but nobody would have ever gone, I wonder how that bird flies, without going, do you see that beautiful blue thing in the sky? You know, they wouldn't have done that. And our ancestors, I mean, kudos to them. They explained the earth and everything in it by just simply observing how beautiful it was and then trying to explain why it worked the way it did. You know, so that's really where science comes from. Without the beauty, you would never see the appreciation in trying to understand it.
Yeah, it's just really enlightening to think about the close connection between art and science. And I think it's great that you're being able to work on a project now that really connects your two interests in these areas. Now, throughout your career, you've managed a lot of projects that use robotics and drone technology. What kind of activities go into planning and executing those kinds of projects?
We usually start with taking the project and working backwards from what somebody wants, because it's easier. Because a lot of times clients can't tell you how to get there, and they don't typically care how you get there. They just want it done. And they want it done, obviously, in the best way possible and the least expensive route. So really, the idea is to design the most efficient and most executable plan that can be done based on what they need. And if it's something like understanding what's going on with the stretch of pipeline, then you would look at the pipeline, the location, the previous surveys or inspections of it, and then build out from there what they need to know and base it off of their requests. Their deliverables is what they're called. And so you know what you're working towards. It's a goal to get to. And then, so I do everything from bidding the project all the way through to the final deliverables.
So what are some of the projects that you've worked on?
Recently, I have worked on a lot of wind farms, offshore wind farms, cable route surveys for those wind farms, and surveys and inspections of the seafloor for cables that were going in for the wind farms. And then the kind of sexier stuff that people really like to hear about, I've worked on locating Nazi ordnance.
Oh, what do you mean by ordnance?
Unexploded bombs.
Oh, wow.
Helped some police officers learn about recovering bodies when people drown and how to find them underwater and quickly. Also to find the boats that they were using when they happened to wreck or things like that. And another project that I was working on actually involves the water column itself and finding things in the water so that biologics couldn't get hung up on them, like fishing nets and lines and stuff like that.
Oh, what does that involve?
So a lot of times what'll happen is if a fishing net breaks free or something like that, it just floats. It floats a certain way in the water. And it doesn't come to the surface and it doesn't necessarily sink to the seafloor. So things will get trapped in it. And there are ways to find it. Obviously, you need sonars to do that. Then you can locate it and pull them out. It's the same principles behind finding gas in the water or finding oil in the water.
Oh, I see.
You're looking for a disturbance in the water column. Sometimes it takes a good eye to catch it.
So there's really a huge environmental component to your projects as well.
You know what? There always is an environmental component because there's so much trash in the ocean. And it's very unfortunate that we see so much. It's gotten a lot better. Companies are very conscious of it. Mm-hmm. There's a zero tolerance policy for most countries now and most companies that you cannot put trash in the water, not so much as a piece of sandwich bread because you can't feed the fish anymore, right? Because they are aware of how long things take to break down in the ocean if they ever do. Yet it's unfortunate that in the oceans stuff washes off from land or still gets dumped over the side of vessels, and it's everywhere. There's no getting around it. So the best thing to do now is to locate it and to clean it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've gotten a lot of knowledge and experience from all these different projects. Where are you looking to take your knowledge and experience next?
Ideally, I'd like to work for a manufacturer for a type of unmanned vehicle company. And which type doesn't really bother me. I'm more interested in what they're doing. So I am applying to various companies that are related to either aerial drones or unmanned vehicles for marine work. I would like to stay working with those in that environment, but working really to help the clients understand and evaluate the technology for their needs. Alternatively, I would work for a company that was in the energy industry, preferably renewables, and looking to use unmanned vehicles or manage the projects for the unmanned vehicles for them. And that's really, really kind of the direction I want to go. Ultimately, my goal is to be in a CTO capacity where you're evaluating the technology for a company. Mm-hmm. I really want to stay in the business aspect of things, so that's what I'm going for, is kind of a business operations role where you're helping people understand what things can do for you. And that's what I'm looking to do. And that's why I'd really like to partner, I think, with a manufacturer, because there's so many different ways the technology can be applied. And it's really just kind of limited by people. It's not really limited by anything else.
Yeah. I mean, as we've been talking today, it really sounds like robotics and drone technology have really changed and grown a lot, even just within the past few years. How do you see that technology continuing to expand into the future?
You know what? It's really kind of sky's the limit at this point, because I'll tell you, in 20 years, I have gone from paper to digital products that live on a cloud. So there's just so much really cool stuff out there. And every day, there's just more stuff. And what makes it really, really neat is how people, especially younger people, are coming up with these ideas going, if we just did this, and now we have drones that deliver burritos. Mm-hmm. I am so happy with this, but also we're seeing them coming up with the ideas of being able to be first responders, bringing defibrillators or things that put out fires, those types of things. And yes, keep doing it. Keep using your imagination. Keep applying this technology, because anything that keeps a human being out of a harness or dangling off of heights is so much better when we can work with the technology and come up with neat ideas and give people jobs that don't put them in harm's way. Obviously, we will always need firefighters and people of that nature, but if we can put out a fire without ever endangering a human life, I'd rather those firefighters be hanging out with us and saying, woo, high five, look what that thing did. Rather than those guys going in. Obviously, there's always going to be risk, and humans are always going to be putting themselves at risk. But unmanned vehicles and remotely operated vehicles can do so much for exploration, can be so much for everyday thing, so that it's unimaginable how many different things we can do, because there really is no limit to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anna, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to work with you or just want to learn more about the type of work that you do?
Well, the best way is to get on my website, aspilette.com, and you can get in touch with me via email through that. You can tweet me, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. Also, you can check out Atomic Dumpling Media through there.
Perfect. And we'll put that information in the show notes of the podcast as well.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Well, thanks so much, Anna, for talking with me on the podcast today. I really enjoyed learning about this new technology, especially since it's really new for me and probably new for some of our listeners as well. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player so you won't miss any episodes. You can also find all the show notes and links we discussed in this episode at our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.